she come walking over and she said, "Can I stand with you?" And I said, "Well, you're taking your chances." She said, "I'll take them." And she's just that kind of person. She's short period of time to learn a lot about somebody. Going to be very sorely missed.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Josh and Tony. And not much more I can say. I knew Bobby Joe for a long time. My children, Michael and Betsy, the same age as Tony and Brian, her husband, and Bobby Joe. So I knew Bobby Joe for a while. She was, as Josh said, the most positive person that you could ever imagine. She brought joy to everything she touched, and I just hope that her husband Brian and her son Freddie can get through this tough time, and I know that the community is standing behind them as best we can. So she will be missed, and anyone who knew Bobby Joe enough to call her a friend is certainly blessed. So she left a mark. So thank you. Okay.
Hey, one quick question to see if we can answer this. What kind of shoes did she like?
What kind of shoes?
What kind of shoes? She had a fetish for shoes, and they were Tory Burch shoes. Every time
Slip-ons.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Every time.
I do think she must hold the record for the most Nahant resident stickers on her windshield by the collection.
Again, thank you for all those kind words, Selectmen. Means a lot. I know it means a lot to Brian and all of her friends and family, and it's really sad for how young she was, and but I'll tell you, I mean, that she truly lived and breathed Nahant. She loved the town, loved the community, loved the people. So we definitely lost a good one, but she'll, like I said, she won't be forgotten.
Tony, do we have any details on what's to come?
Her services, there's a wake at Solomini on Ocean Street in Lynn on Friday from 4 to 8 p.m. And then on Saturday, they'll be doing a celebration of life at the Knights of Columbus starting at 11 a.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, what other announcements before I get into the more mundane stuff? I want to let people know that our librarian, Sharon, is leaving. She's retiring, and we're going to have a time for Sharon at the Nahant Library on Thursday, September 14th, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Words of gratitude will be around 6 o'clock. So anybody wishing to say goodbye to Sharon, please show up. She was a great source at the library for many years, and we will miss her. We have a new librarian coming in at the end of September, so we'll have a time where people can meet her also. But I encourage anybody who wants to say their goodbyes to Sharon, because she's moving to the Midwest, I believe, or Ohio. Please show up at the Nahant Library on Thursday, September 14th at 5 p.m. Thanks. Okay, other announcements. 2000. No one cares about pocket stickers now anymore.
Yeah, we can probably take that one off.
Probably skip that one. Composting area is open from Wednesdays and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 2023 pocket stickers required. Visit the Public Works page for a full list of acceptable materials. Recycling and metal waste goods, TVs and computers, last Saturday of each month until October 26th. from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Behind the DPW garage on Flash Road. Resident stickers required. Again, visit Nahant Public Works at nahant.org for acceptable materials. Certain fees may apply. There will be a special town meeting on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Nahant Town Hall, 334 Nahant Road, Nahant, Mass. And I think this is, we'll have one more after this, I guess. Market by the Sea, Saturday, 10 a.m., 1 p.m. at Flash Road, September 16th. And the final one will be on October 14th. For more information or to become a vendor, please visit the market page at nahant.org or email ktaylor@nahant.org. Any other announcements, Gene or Josh?
No. Nope.
Okay.
I have none.
Okay, we'll go into new business. We have some surplus equipment. Do I have a motion on that?
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to declare the 2002 Nahant Police Department speed trailer as surplus equipment, and that the equipment be placed on municipal bid for auction per MGL Chapter 308 procurement law.
Seconded.
Seconded. That was Chapter 30B, but seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? It certainly serves a useful life. I appreciate the pictures, Tony. It doesn't look like it's in very good shape. I'm not quite sure you'll get many votes, many bids on this piece of equipment, but good luck. Any further discussion?
There's a little bit of backup info here. So this was purchased in 2002 by Chief Waters for $9,900 and refurbished a few times over the last 21 years. And it's served a good life. Replacing the batteries is $3,000. And so it's time to go.
I agree. Any further discussion? We have a new one, right, Tony?
We're shopping for one now. There's quite a few to choose from off of the state contract list, the state bid list. So we're shopping through them now.
Okay, great. All right, any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor?
Andrew, Mike?
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen and I. We have some event requests. We'll take that, please.
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote following event requests. The annual Nahant Women's Club Holiday Fair on Saturday, November 25th, 2023 at 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Nahant Town Hall, and Nahant Women's Softball Fall League on Sundays from September 10th, 2023 to November 12th, 2023, starting at 10 a.m. at the Lowland Softball Field.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Again, the Women's Softball League will have players park at the fire station on Knights of Columbus parking lot if it is a beach day, to ensure that there's ample beach parking. And the way the summer and end of summer is turning out, it may very well be a beach day. So,
Exactly.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor?
Josh Andrew, Mike?
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen and I.
Before, Mr. Chairman, before you get to the next one, we're waiting on a few more pieces of required information for this one-day liquor license. So we're actually gonna move this to the next meeting on September 20th, which is still 10 days prior to the event. But if you want to announce the event, go ahead. We're just not gonna vote on the liquor license yet.
Okay, we'll do that at the next meeting. The Village Church will be hosting a concert event. And they would like the ability to sell and serve beer and wine. So I know that Jen McCarthy is working on that, and I'm sure she'll get all the pieces together for our next meeting. The event is going to be at the Nahant Village Church at 27 Cliff Street on Saturday, September 30th, 2023, from 5 to 7 p.m. And I look forward to voting on that at our next meeting. We have some minutes to approve.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from May 17th, 2023, June 7th, and June 21st, 23.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Josh Antrim,
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye. So we have some ongoing business, Comcast, Verizon cable contracts, and PEG funding. I see here that Dan, our town council, is going to discuss this, give some information.
Yeah, the last time we talked about this, we decided that the only moving part that we're concerned about is the PEG funding. And I got together with Allison and we talked about what we've been spending over the past years in terms of PEG. And it turns out our biggest expense is Pedro buying his services, and that only amounts to about $3,300 a month annually. We have plenty of PEG for that. In addition to that, we've already had a pretty big upgrade back in 2020 to the tune of about 35 grand. So our PEG level right now is appropriate. I don't see a need to go any higher. If we do go higher, that's just a further cost that goes to the subscribers. It's a pass through. So I don't think that benefits anyone when we already have enough funding at the moment. At the same time, we're not hearing a demand for any more PEG or any more PEG services. So with the rise in Zoom and all these sort of remote access avenues, I think the current PEG rate is appropriate. I don't think we need to ask for any more. And even if we do ask for more, we can do that in 5 years, which is a change we need to negotiate with Comcast. But other than that, I think we can keep basically the current contract as it is. One or two benefits is that we get high def in this next round of contracts with the PEG channel. So that's a good thing. A few other small discounts for seniors and veterans. But other than that, I think we just go along with the proposal as it was provided, or for draft anyway. And then we can have it on your desk within a week or two. And then we have to actually have a hearing again after we approve it. But all I need to know now is if you guys have any concerns about the PEG funding that I just discussed. If not, I'll just go forward with the negotiations with Comcast and Verizon to make sure that's solidified for the next time we talk about this.
Thank you, Dan. Josh or Jane, any further comments on this?
Josh?
No, thanks.
No, none here.
Okay, so we'll put this on next, put on the agenda for our next meeting, Dan.
Well, not the next meeting. At some point, we've got to get you the final proposals from both of these companies and make sure you guys are okay with them, and then we can go from there. But it won't be the next meeting, it's part of the meeting after, but we're making good head.
Sounds good. Okay, trash rates. So do I have a motion on the FY24 trash rates? And then we can have Tony discuss them for us.
Do you like that one, Gene?
No, okay, sure. Go ahead, take that. I'm shuffling paper.
All right. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the FY 2024 trash rate and abatements as outlined in the document titled Town of Nahant FY 23 trash rates and abatements. Is that
Yeah. Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion on this motion, Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've been talking about for the last 4 months or so, the cost of trash or collecting and recycling and disposing of household waste, the industry has skyrocketed and in price, and that's nationwide. It's not just Massachusetts; it's across the country. And we're in a 5-year contract. It goes our price goes up 4% each year, and so we've been trying to find ways to minimize the increase as much as possible and make it as palatable as possible for our residents. That's why last meeting we talked about a compost pilot program with the hope that it would reduce our tonnage and ultimately our overall costs. And we're looking, and we're also going to, in the past, the town has always issued one trash fee per year. So this year, starting this year, we're actually going to divide the total rate into 3 payments and attach a third of it to each one of the water sewer bills that each household receives. We feel that's a way to, make it a little bit easier for residents to account for the increase. But these rates have gone up. So for, a standard residential one unit last year was $380. This year it's $405. For commercial, last year was $505. This year it's $534. We still are providing a 30% abatement for elderly, nonprofit and government properties. And then if any, commercial or other entity that has their own dumpster and utilizes a private hauler, they're eligible for a 65% reduction.
Tony, how do they know that they is there a lot of available abatements for them?
It doesn't change very much from year to year, Gene. So what we do, the elderly ones, we get the list from the assessor's office. This is it's a abatement defined age that qualifies you by mass law. So our assessor's office knows who qualifies for that, and we get that list, and we actually pre-abate for elderly. For the others, which are private hauler type commercial or residential properties, they're aware of it because they come in every single year. And this year, those are larger, and what we're actually going to separate those out. Those bills will be conducted in the same manner as a one-time payment, a one-time bill. Really, the only ones that are being split up are the into 3 separate payments are your standard, residential, commercial properties that aren't typically eligible for an abatement. And then, of course, we're also doing the $20 abatement for anyone that has a composting collection service agreement. So if you, let's say you have an agreement with Black Earth, you can apply for a $20 abatement on that as well.
Tony, do you remember how the rates have changed over the previous 3 years since our last contract with Waste Management?
Well, as I said, our total amount has increased 4% each year. When I first started, the residential rate was closer to $350, I think, per unit.
Yeah.
So that would have been in 2018 or 19.
Okay.
So it's steadily, over the last 5 years, it's gone up about, $10 per year.
Yeah, I'm trying to gauge so this year's increase is about 6.5% for single family home and 2 and 3 family homes. Just trying to gauge what the annual increase has been. I think, if it's on the order of 2.5% to 2.5%, that makes sense. with, economics. So this is a bigger jump than I think in years past, but that's the way the contract worked out. But just trying to gain some historical perspective over the last few years.
Yeah, again, we determine the rates very conservatively. The town doesn't, we only build in a small contingency in case, more abatements come in than expected, or, we run into a small deficit for whatever reason. Less recycling, or the recycling market. So part of the way the contract works is the way that the recycling market will actually get a reduction in our pricing if the recycling materials, become more valuable in the waste stream. And if it goes the other way, we don't get as much of a benefit. But we really try to build this revenue stream as conservatively as possible, because it's not, a for-profit business for us. It's a pass-through, to waste management. It also, contributes to the costs associated with, public parks, trash, cleaning beaches, the compost facility, street sweeping, things of that nature. So, but all of it, we try to keep it as limited as possible. The increase, we try to limit the increase as much as possible. And that's why we're also, looking into these other things, like pushing a pilot program for composting. We've looked at potentially, doing uniform trash barrels. That's going to be an upcoming conversation in the near future. Providing the abatement for composting as well, separating the bills into 3 payments. These are all different types of tools that we're, trying to use so that we can help with the impact to residents with the cost. And hopefully, if we did, as a reminder, why we're looking at uniform barrels is if we have uniform barrels with trash and recycling, it could put us in a position to negotiate a better contract once this one is up, or as soon as Waste Management has the automatic trash trucks available for our service area. And by going to an automatic collection, it reduces labor costs by increasing the speed of which that they are able to collect our trash in Nahant. So that's why we're looking into that effort too, in part.
Yeah, I know you and the financial team have spent a lot of time looking at different scenarios with Waste Management and, trying hard to keep the costs down. So thanks for that. And I also want to remind anybody that may have forgotten that trash and recycling are a separate enterprise fund. So by and large, it's the cost of taking your trash away is what your trash bill is. It's separate from the general fund. It's a self-funded enterprise fund, and that's all it pays for.
And when we've looked into these measures too, and have had different discussions during public meetings, we've also received a lot of response from residents that they enjoy the ability to put an unlimited amount of trash on the curb, that they're not restricted like other towns with 30-gallon barrels or pay-as-you-throw type styles. So, it's really, we're trying to balance, the luxury of our current curbside collection service and the cost, and trying to find that middle ground.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tony. As Josh said, I know you spend a lot of time on this. And as Josh said, this is an enterprise fund. It doesn't affect the tax base at all. One thing I would like to see, Tony, is a comparison from year to year of the tonnage per month. I know we get those reports from Waste Management. I don't know if our tonnage is going up or going down, but it'll be nice to see.
Definitely, it's gonna be part of our, we're calling it out as like a specific way to measure the success of the pilot program anyway. So we're gonna be, we get those reports from Waste Management regularly, but we'll be looking at them even closer. We want to see how the composting pilot program, impacts that.
Okay, great. Any further discussion on this? We don't need a vote on this tonight, right, Tony? No?
No, you do. You just
Yeah.
Motion to approve.
Okay. I don't have the
think you should
motion.
have one in your list.
Yep, the motion was made and seconded,
Oh.
I think.
Okay, that's right. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just when you made the motion, did you? I'm looking at the trash rate breakdown that was included in your packet. You mentioned the abatements for elderly nonprofit at 30% and the private pickup abatement for 65%. If you could also just add in the addition of the $20 abatement for composting customers.
So moved. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor?
Josh Antrim, aye.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen and I. Next item is town administrators goals update. I asked,
Can I just push in a couple of questions on ongoing business?
okay, do you want, we're still on ongoing business. Do you want to wait until we get to the end of the?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, I'll get back to Jane on it. Town administrators goals and updates. I've asked Kristen to send to each of you a revised copy of the 2022-2023 town administrators goals, and to add to that a provision where each of us would be able to rank the goals as to whether it needs improvements, it meets expectations, or it exceeds expectations. And then there was also a note field below it. So what I'd ask, like for you, Josh and Jean, to do over the next week, to go through that and do your scorecard, if you would. I would suggest that if any of the goals were needs improvements or exceeds expectations, a quick sentence why would be appropriate, and then I'll put that together and we can finalize that at our next meeting. In addition to that, I would like to just use the 2022-2023 goals and objectives for 2024. And Tony, if you want to add something to that, those goals as we move forward, please do that. And Josh and Jean, if you want to edit it or add something, please do that. And I'll work with Kristen to try to get that all together for our next meeting.
All right, so sorry, Gene, go ahead.
I think if I could, I think it would be a great idea. Mark, by the way, excellent.
Yeah.
That's going to help an awful lot to put these together and put them behind us. And speaking about putting them behind us, I think that what we should do is concentrate, and you might have just said that, but we should concentrate on editing and cleaning up what we have in front of us before we continue on, unless we've got something dramatic that we need to complete.
Yeah, there certainly might be something fiscal year specific that you may want to include. That for you, Josh and Jane and Tony, also, if you want to include something specific that you want us to measure, then please add that. I know that Josh, you may have some comments on this.
I was just asking for clarification. So your request is that we email back our assessments to you or
To Kristen.
okay, okay. I did my homework. I just have to turn it in.
Okay, good.
And I did add you know, the needs improvement meets expectations and exceeds expectations, you know, it's a little thin. So as you say, I added a sentence or two on each topic, explaining my choice.
Good enough. And Jane, if you could do the same over the next week, that would be great.
I intend to, and I also think we can take and condense some of these and kind of wrap them in amongst each other because some of them overlap.
Okay.
But
Yes,
for the most part, yeah.
there is some overlap. Yeah, and it's probably a function of, you know, 4 people submitting goals and trying to whittle it down to a consolidated list. But
Right.
I guess I just want to add that Tony, I think you just passed your 5-year mark as town administrator, correct?
August, yeah, it was in August of 2018.
Yeah. So I'll just say, I think you've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years. The town's looking good. The financials are vastly improved over when you took over. The open spaces are looking great. Obviously, there's areas that we need to work on, but I see a couple purposes to setting these goals and reviewing your progress every year. Number one is to hold you accountable, of course, to the residents of the town, and at least as importantly is the goal is really for the Board of Selectmen to do what we can to make sure you succeed. Right, that's what we're really trying to do here is put you in the best position to do the best possible job for the town of Nahant by setting these goals and measuring you on them. So certainly not meant to be punitive. It's meant to you know, help you achieve as much as you possibly can as our town administrator.
And I appreciate the time and effort you guys put into them. I honestly look to those goals, that set of, I have them printed and it's you know, usually right on the top of my desk because you know, it's hard, you know, if you're not in it to know, but there's so much stuff going on a daily basis. And so having those goals and understanding, you know, where the priorities are, it helps, you know, make sure that we're making progress on those things throughout the year, because it's easy to get, you know, caught up in the day-to-days and, you know, what's hot at the moment type stuff. You know, and you really have to balance that with your, you know, your short, mid, and long-term goals.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's good to have those, you know, there and defined, because I know, you know, you spend a lot of your time fighting multiple fires a day. So, you know, hopefully it helps bring you around to keeping those goals in mind. So,
Yep.
and I have to admit, you know, I've been a selectman 4.5 years now, and it's complicated, but your job is a very complicated job. So many moving parts. So really good job, Tony. That's my summary.
Thank you.
I would support exactly what is being said there. I'll parrot that. And hopefully we can help out more, but just to drop back on something there, Mark's meet or exceed, I think, is going to help a great deal with reviewing these goals and objectives and coming up with a more condensed version, but one that also we could also identify whether these are short or long-term goals. And we could also put a date for completion, anticipate, as part of a goal. So it may be something that we want to finish or meet by, January 1st of next year or June 30th of next year. Something reasonable that we can work with in all the time we have in front of us. So I think if we do the meet and exceed, we do some completion dates and maybe even list whether they're short or long term. Just a thought.
I think those are really good suggestions, Gene.
Yeah, so do
Thank
I,
you.
Jim. Thank you. And just to add to that, I think obviously it's important to help Tony, because I'm sure Tony sits with his department heads and he can share his goals with the department heads, because it's all trickle down, as you know. Tony relies on we rely on Tony relies on his department heads. So there has to be a seamless sort of connection with all of these goals. And I know firsthand that Tony does that. I'd also add that we have a semi-annual review of these. As Gene said, it's probably not fair to establish a goal at day one of the fiscal year and then at the end of the fiscal year review them. We should review them either quarterly or at least semi-annually, so that if there's something going on or there's some adjustments that Tony would like to make on a goal or a time frame, he's able to do that at that time. I think it's only fair to allow that to happen, rather than wait till the end and say, what happened here, or that type of thing.
Touche.
Okay, so everybody who has their homework for next week, like I said, get that information to Kristen and I'll work with her over the next week and get it for our next meeting. Tony, again, you make your edits and changes as you see fit also.
Sounds good, will do.
Okay. All right. Before we move to public forum, Gene, you had something
Yeah,
to say?
just a couple of things that I got hit with over the last couple of weeks since our last meeting. 9 Little Nahant Road. I know they're up there. They've closed on it. They're working on it. Where do we stand on that?
I can address that. We don't have any stance at the moment. We've gotten the amount of money we're going to get in terms of our back taxes and our abated taxes, or not abated, but postponed, shall we say, taxes. And we got an abatement for the remaining of it. So there were no taxes left owed on the property. And now the new owners, looks like their superstructure is still there. Looks like they're just taking down the decking and some other parts of it. But I've gotten no word from anyone from their group indicating what they're intending to do in terms of the long-term goal, other than making it a great house, is what I learned about 2 months ago. But other than that, it's been quiet from our point of view.
Okay, great.
Gene, we don't have any other task list with that property. Our relationship with that property is complete now.
Good, then that's the answer I can provide.
Make sure you include that we got our tax money.
Short-term rentals with the AG's office.
We got some letters recently from the municipal law unit approving the rules and regulations part of the bylaw. They're taking a closer look at the table of uses part of the bylaw, because there's been some federal case law that has come down from the South indicating that a ban on short-term rentals in terms of non-owner occupied might be problematic in terms of the federal point of view, not a state point of view, but a federal point of view. So they're just taking a harder look at that until they get back to us. I think they asked for 90 days, which puts us out into somewhere in October for their deadline to occur. I think we'll get something much sooner than that, but we should expect something in the late October area.
So it's still out there. We are discussing it, and we anticipate some closure.
we're not discussing it. The AG is discussing it. Our discussion is done, right? We've done our, town meeting has done their thing. So we're just waiting at this point.
Okay, great.
We do, the part of that bylaw charged the Board of Selectmen to develop rules and regulations. So that is something that we need to get going on and get some draft regs written up and probably have some public meetings regarding those and look for public comment on them. So we do have, we do have some things to work on, Gene, in that regard.
Well, yeah, that begs a question too. I'm glad you brought that up. Are we going to continue or reappoint a subcommittee to assist in that?
Something to discuss.
Tony, I think we've actually already done that.
It's not on the agenda for tonight, so I don't think we should get into yes or no or how we feel about that, but it's definitely an item for us to talk about and discuss as we move forward.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Last thing, speeding. I don't know why I get hit with it so often, but I do. And right now it's centered on the stretch between the town hall and the library, that lower level, and Willow Road. And what I was going to ask tonight is if anybody else is getting those complaints.
I'm not getting any complaints, no. I see on Willow Road, the new speed limit stanchions are in place, but I haven't received any complaints at all.
Josh?
No, I haven't heard anything about speeders recently.
Okay, all right, great. And Tony, I think you've done a lot of work down on Willow Road to try to moderate the speeds down there.
Yeah, we have, the data collected after installing the center line slow signs showed that they were working, really well. And then we added a speed radar sign on that end of Willow. So there's 2 speed radar signs on Willow Road, one down the wharf end of the road and one down the Ocean View side of the, the Kelly Green side of the road. So,
Yeah.
And then there's multiple center line crosswalk signs in front of Tudor Beach, which also helps slow people down. So, I think it's not uncommon, Gene, to hear from residents that they're concerned about speeding. We've actually had an increased presence of traffic patrol over the last few months, funded by a grant. So our typical number of police officers on the road have been increased, and at no cost to our general fund, actually funded through a traffic grant. And we've probably, if I've gotten complaints about speeding, it's more so about how many people have been pulled over and that the speed limit's too low. So, I think it's not uncommon that when we get complaints about speeding, our first step is typically to put out a traffic count, traffic data collector, and we analyze, what is actually happening on the ground. And often, pretty much almost always, the speeding is not as bad as it seems. And I think if you think about it, if you live on a main road, you're not going to remember the 50 cars that drive by at, a slow tick. You're going to remember the 5 that went down, a little bit faster or much faster. And that can quickly turn into like a concern about constant speeding, but it's really not, doesn't tend to be that way. If it does tend to be that way, we've, deployed different types of traffic calming measures across all of Nahant that have been effective. And, so if the data calls for an improvement, we usually, deploy something and it usually works. But so that's our first step. We've looked at the data in front of the town hall, and we've looked at the data on Willow Road, and it doesn't, especially Willow Road now, the improvements we've put there have worked. And the data in front of the town hall really doesn't call for that, a necessary improvement at this time, but we can measure it again.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Tony, public forum, special town meeting, questions and answers.
All right, so next week, special town meeting, everyone should have received their finance committee book that looks like this. I'll blur it out. It's a blue book, and we also have plenty of extras at the town hall. And if you go onto nahant.org, under the helpful links, there's a link called Special Town Meeting, and you can download a copy of this there as well. This is a very important article, very important subject. And, I really want to make sure. There seems to be, there's a lot of social media traffic, which is a good thing, and I don't want it to sound like a bad thing. It's good that the questions are being asked, and it's actually helpful for us to understand, where, missing information might be, or confusion, or, potential other suggestions, worth considering. We worked when this latest challenge related to the Coast Guard housing project was presented. We met with the finance committee, our board of selectmen, Allison, our finance director, and we ran through a number of different options. We considered a number of different alternatives, and landed on going to town meeting, putting together a special town meeting to ask the town for the authority to borrow up to $1 million to continue along with the efforts that we've been making over the last 2.5 years. I wrote a 2-page letter in the FinCom book. It's on page 6 that really talks about what we've been doing over the last 2.5 years since the town meeting vote. And there's a lot of information there, and it's kind of a long read, but it really does help. I hope present factually what the town has been doing over the last 2 years on this project. So we wanted to offer this opportunity for the public, which we know has, a number of questions to ask them. We are an open town meeting form of government, and it's the residents that decide, how we move forward on this. Because I'm in the middle of it, and finance committee and board of selectmen are in the middle of it, and been in the middle of it, we've put together a recommendation that we think is in the best interest of the town. But we want to make sure that the residents are informed, and if they have any questions or concerns, that we're here to answer those, so that they can make an informed decision at town meeting. So that's what we're doing here tonight. I have a list of questions that I've seen on social media, or people have emailed me, or have called and asked, or just stopped in and talked to me about. So if we get into a lull, I can get into some of those, but to me, I guess before we get, just one last point before we get into the public forum, I'll just say that, this issue, we've run into, as I mentioned, we've run into a number of challenges with this project, and we've overcome them pretty significantly throughout the last 2.5 years, and this is the next challenge. But we're trying to carry out the wishes of town meeting from 2021. And to me, it's not, this isn't a pet project. It's not a legacy project. It's not it's not just a housing issue or an open space issue. This is a pivotal point in the town's finances. And it's extremely important to how our finances are going to look in the future based on the decisions we make at this town meeting and the decisions we make surrounding this project. There is $1.8 million that is due in January of 2025. And the town does not have 1.8 million to pay that loan on. So there are alternative ways to attack this issue. But as I mentioned, we've sifted through a lot of those, I think all of them, and what's being recommended and what we're asking the town to vote on Tuesday is what, we believe is the best interest of the town, financially now regarding this issue. And I can get into more of that as we get into questions, but that's my opening comment.
Thank you, Tony. Josh or Jane, do you have anything to add before we go into questions and answers?
Yes, I would like to add a couple things. First of all, as Tony said, social media, Facebook, that's fine. But I would really encourage people to take the minute they're asking a question on Facebook to just email us, abarletta@nahant.org, gcanty@nahant.org, jantrim@nahant.org, mcullen@nahant.org. Send an email so that when you ask the question, it's from an informed position. Because what I would love to respond to some of those things, but it's not in anyone's best interest, I don't think. But we want everyone to be informed. So just ask the question and we'll give you an answer. And just to expand a tiny bit on what you just said, Tony, the reason we're recommending this is because the reason we're saying that this is the best option for the town is based on math and the law. It's not based on anyone's personal preference, or it's math, law, and practical thinking. That's it.
Well, yeah, I would add to that in town meeting vote from 2021.
Yeah, of course. Our job is we don't the town voters decide how much money we're going to spend and what we're going to spend it on. Our job is to do that in the most economical manner possible to keep all our tax rate. We're all taxpayers here. So our goal is to keep the tax rate down.
If I could, Tony, at our last meeting, you put a pencil to this, and it actually, with everything taken into consideration, adds and deducts, we wound up somewhere in the vicinity of a profit back to the town of probably some 1.5 million plus. Can you do that right now? A quick pencil so people looking in or calling in will have an idea of how this is going to work?
Yeah, again, the Finance Committee book has all the information that one could possibly, I think, need, but there are certainly questions that come from that, and that's why we're here to answer them. And trust me, I'll be ready to answer those questions on town hall floor Tuesday night as well. But we have 1.8 million that we need to pay off in January of 2025. We have a town meeting vote that occurred in 2021 that we have to follow. And we have to live within the limits of the motion that was read at town meeting. And that is an important fact and is actually something I've used a lot to answer some of the questions that I've received. The motion is in Appendix 3 on page 11 in your book. And it talks very clearly about what the future plan is. And this recommendation from the Coast Guard Housing Committee that was voted on at that meeting, was followed multiple public meetings and process. So it's, this has been a very much vetted discussion and plan. And that town meeting, was the highest attended town meeting in the history of Nahant town meetings. So it was I got, the question a lot about, well, wasn't it just authority? It didn't direct the selectmen to follow that. Well, while that's true, 500 something voters there, I forget what this, I have the exact number, voted in favor of this. It was a pretty clear direction from a large portion sample size of the town saying, town, this is what we think we should do. This is how we should solve this problem. Now you go and get it done. It was 535 votes in the affirmative, 270 votes in the negative. The other big item here is that the proceeds from the sale of these properties have to, by law, go first to pay off the 1.8 million. So another question we've had a lot is, well, that town meeting authorized 300,000. Why not just use that to slowly, demolish the building, sell it, use the proceeds to finance the next demolition, sell it, and continue on that path. That we can't do that because the proceeds from the sales have to first go towards paying off the loan. So we cannot use the proceeds of a sale to finance future demolition costs. Two, the motion from 2021 said that the selectmen to sell alternating lots in 2 offers over 2 years. So, once you go into a third offer, or once you go past 2 years, you're now in violation of that motion. So we have to live within that realm as well. That's why we're coming, to the town to say, now that we've done this procurement for the demolition costs, which, the reason we did it this way was you're going to get your best price with the most amount of housing units vacant ready for demolition possible, because you're only going to pay for a contractor to mobilize one time. The more you procure this, the more expensive it could be, because now you're procuring it multiple times, new contractors coming out every so often and mobilizing again. So for the town, and in the town's best financial interest, we wanted to try to get the best, bang for our buck. So we, that's why we procured for the 9 units that are now vacant. So by authorizing us to borrow up to $1 million, and the reason we're asking for up to $1 million is because there's another 3 units that are going to eventually be vacated and need to be demolished as well. So by looking at the cost of the procurement to demolish the 9 vacant units, which came in around $670,000. If you divide that by 9, you come to somewhere close to $75,000 per unit. If you times that by 3, you're in the $240,000 range, which we are using as a, conservative estimate for what it could potentially cost us to demo the other 3 when the time comes. We figure it would be better to ask for the authorization now than have to come back again to a potential special town meeting or wait until town meeting to deal with that issue later on. There's other contingencies involved with, hopefully not, but possible soil contamination remediation that might be necessary once we remove the underground oil tanks. There's other professional costs related to overseeing the remediation process. There may be professional service costs associated with the reverse procurement process of selling the land. There may be other costs associated with preparing the land for sale, like leveling, sidewalk issues, other items like that. So we're asking for the 1 million, which would be added into the 300 that was previously approved in 2021, which totals 1.3 million. It gives us a contingency of about $340,000 to be used for those additional things that are gonna have to happen no matter what the future plan of this property is gonna be. So these buildings are 2x3 construction. They don't meet the stretch energy code. They're built in the 1950s. Selling them as is, first of all, would be a violation of the 2021 town meeting vote. And secondly, any work associated with upgrading these buildings would require major renovation because they don't meet, current code. So that's, I don't want to get too far down the road of why the committee suggested what they did. Again, it was, multiple public meetings vetted, and it was recommended at town meeting, and that's what was voted. So that's what we're trying to follow. And honestly, I think that $340,000 contingency plan, it may sound like a lot, it may not be enough. I think it's a conservative number. It's possible that eventually when the 3 units become vacant and we go out to bid to demo those, costs could go up again, or we could get a new group of bidders. They could bid differently. You never know how the results of procurement could go. So if we are estimating somewhere around 350 to 450,000 per lot, Gene, I think this is where I'm finally getting to answering your question. If I average that out to 400,000 per lot, times 12 is 4.8 million. If you subtract the 1.8 million that we owe on the loan, that brings you down to 3 million. And then if you subtract the 300,000 that was previously approved and the 1 million, should it get approved on Tuesday night. So if you subtract another 1.3 million, that's 1.7 million conservatively additional revenue to the town. And then certainly, with the development of housing, you're, creating new growth and a new tax base. So I mean, that should spark some conversation, I think.
I guess
Hopefully-
in addition, an additional expense that you didn't mention would be the interest on the new loan, which Allison, our finance director, has said that if we had it for 5 years at the anticipated 6% would sum up to $150,000. And I just wanted to make one quick point. So even if the article wording allowed us to do this incrementally, I think the question of why don't we just take the $300,000 loan that's already approved and do this incrementally is a very good question. I asked myself the same question. Why do we want to take another big loan when we can just take a smaller loan that would pay for knocking down 2 houses, sell those, take that profit to bring them in and knock down another 4 houses. And so when you do the math on that, it turns out that it's cheaper because the quote we have now for 9 houses, as you said, Tony, $669,000 works out to $74,333 to be exact per house. If a vendor is coming back for 2 houses, they're not going to charge you $74,333. They're going to charge you $110 each or something like that. So when you and they have to come back at least 4 times by my estimate, if you do it incrementally, and you wind up paying, by my estimates, well over $100,000 more than you would if you bought the 9 and then the 3 and paid $150,000 in interest. So it's just basic math. That's the most economical way to do this. It's it might not be intuitive because, you know, of course, everyone doesn't want to take a loan. But when you look at the numbers analytically, it's cheapest. It's also fastest. It's the least amount of procurement effort on your part. Not that we as citizens would care about you having to work extra, but you know, bottom line is it's just cheaper. So
and even if you changed, you know, the motion that restricts it to 2 offers over 2 years, you're, as you mentioned, you're ultimately going to be paying more money. It's going to take longer. It could take you risk the ability to potentially raise 1.8 by January of 2025. But even if you could do that, even if those were not issues, the law requires us to use the proceeds from the sale to pay off the original 1.8 loan first. So a town meeting vote to change that motion, to give us some different direction, to do it in that way, we still wouldn't be able to do it because the revenue from the first sale would have to go towards the 1.8, and then we're stuck in the same problem again with no money for the next demolition. You know what I mean?
yes.
But then also all of this begs the question, or brings up the question, or will bring up the question of why are we talking about 9 houses versus 12? And that's where it's going to get a little sticky.
Well, there's only 9 houses vacant at the moment, and
Right.
you know, and we didn't even get to 9 until April of this year. You know, so while we're going through the legal process of attempting to have the other 3 units vacated, there are still 3 people living there, and we can't demolish those homes or, you know, treat them any differently until we go through the proper legal process. They have their rights as tenants, and we have to respect that. So, you know, we're making the effort, but we also have 1.8 to pay in January of 2025. So, you know, and the real estate market has changed, you know, pretty drastically in just the past 6 months. So, you know, we felt, you know, let's make progress on this now, because we don't want to risk, changes in the real estate market or risk having the ability to pay off the 1.8 in January of 2025.
All right, Tony, I've spent a lot of time with you on this over the past several weeks, and you certainly have done your due diligence, and so has Allison, and I'm convinced we're on the right track here. I'm sure it'll be a lively discussion at town meeting, and that's what town meetings are for. But with that said, if there's no other comments right now, Gene and Josh, Tony, you want to open it up to questions and answers at this point to the public?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So just raise your hand. I'll call on you and to unmute. I'm just going to go from left to right on my screen. Brendan, you are the first on my screen here. Please announce your name and address and your comment or question.
All right. Brendan Bronick Olmsted, 2 Summer Street, Nahant. My first question is, has the 2021 article that was approved, has the funds actually been spent according to the text of the article? Because I reread it and there was no mention of all this additional prep work. It only talks about the purpose of the demolition of the lands, the removal of the underground storage tank, and the leveling. So I was just kind of wondering, has the money that's actually been spent that we approved actually, is that justified by the text? That's my first question.
Yeah, so the 300 was approved. We signed a contract with Axiom, which is, again, a lot of the information's in the book. They're part of the process. So we hired them to do a building material assessment of the vacant properties so that they could develop the spec that would be included in the procurement documents, which were put out earlier this year. And then they will also, be overseeing that process as it happens and making sure that all of our, proper paperwork and documentation is filed appropriately. So yeah, they are definitely, within the limits of the 300,000 that was approved, because they are, an integral part of the demolition process.
Okay. My second question was following up about the information sessions from the town meeting from 2021, information sessions 1 and 2. I couldn't find those online. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. Had you had any luck seeing if those are actually available online?
I looked the next day and they were on there.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. They were right under the 2021 town meeting. Were you looking on the website or were you looking on YouTube?
I was trying YouTube.
The link to them I think are on the website.
Okay.
If you shoot me an email, Brendan, just so I don't forget, I could, if you have trouble again finding the links, I'll send them to you.
Okay. I got one last question. What should be changed in the committee's process for developing estimates, to try to prevent the sticker shock that we're experiencing right now? Because it kind of feel, the impression was when we voted in 2021 that, I at the time thought there was some level of assessment done to figure out how much it would cost. And I know there was a slide that the Coast Guard committee put up mentioning the 300,000 and listed 160,000 for the demolition. But the estimate that the town's recently gotten is now dramatically higher. So what could be done to try to help committees so that they don't, ask for for X amount of money now, but then we get sticker shock a few years later?
Yeah, it's always a challenge because when you go out for, the only true way to get numbers is to actually go through an RFP process. And those numbers, the contractors that bid are only required to hold their price for 14 days. We were able to, we asked American Environmental if they would be willing to hold their price for 90 days so we could pull together a special town meeting. And they were luckily willing to do so. And if you remember that committee at the time had recommended, a 1 year grace period to the residents. So, it's really hard. It was hard to really come with a true estimate at that time. I mean, we were wrong about what we estimated. I probably don't hear that often from government, but it was wrong. It was a bad estimate in the sense that you couldn't account for, those market changes, and they never did at the time because those units had not been vacated at the time. They weren't able to do, the level of building material assessment that we were able to accomplish earlier this year. So, if you look at the bids that came in, the cost just for demolition is actually somewhere close to about 300 to 400,000. I think it's less than 400,000. On the if you break down the bids, it's the abatement process is so labor intensive because it's, if this was one building with 12 floors on it, it'd be cheaper. But because they have to, they have to seal a building, they have to remove the material, they have to package it correctly, they have to transport it, then they unseal that building, go to the next one and do that process all over again. I think that is a large chunk of the, unestimated costs from that. So, it's hard to go out for a procurement prior to having town meeting approval because you don't want to, contractors put a lot of effort into bidding on these things. So you don't want to, have them go through it and then not be able to award anything because you don't have success at a town meeting. So it's really tough. Sometimes it's just the way it works. You have to kind of go to town meeting first for approval, and then you go through the process and, you hope that you don't have to go back. Unfortunately, in this case, we did.
Let me just jump in here for a minute, Tony. Brendan, I think that's an excellent question. And, I'm not quite sure how the estimate from the Coast Guard Committee came about. But certainly they weren't provided through a town meeting vote, any appropriation to get professional services in terms of, gaining what the cost should be. And I would agree with you when it comes to things like this, when committees are charged with making a recommendation that is going to cost the town money, then the town should be responsible for providing them the resources that they need to come up with a good estimate. So I think it's something. It's a point well taken. I think it's a good point that you made.
All right. I guess the one last thing I would have is when we have these unknowns, is there a way we could, so when we do the town meetings and have to vote, that these unknowns are at least made more aware to the citizens? I know we provide the text of the article, but I don't know if there's any other way, like, some of these, unknowns that could get us down the line could at least be made more, acknowledged better so that everyone can be, informed when they vote. And that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brendan. Good questions. Peter.
Okay, I got a couple questions and
You
I'll just
start,
speak.
Peter, if you don't mind, just
Oh,
start.
yeah. Peter Galaki, 20 Simmons Road, Nahant, Mass, 01908.
Yep, thank you.
A couple questions. I'll just spew them all out and then let you guys wrestle through them. First one was declaring the police speed thing
Let's stick to, Peter, let's do just Coast Guard housing related questions.
No, oh,
So we're
so
gonna-
I thought it was open forum to talk about anything.
We're gonna do that at the end, not short.
Okay.
Shortly after
So,
this.
so
I wanna
Coast Guard
connect it.
housing.
Yeah.
So Coast Guard housing, although I completely agree with a lot of what Brendan said, why don't we sell them for 300,000 as is with the requirement you have to take out the oil tanks, and then any changes to the property, meaning upgrades, build-ons, changes, whatever, then mean you have to conform to current building standards, 2x4 construction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like we could do that without having to incur the cost of a tear down and without incurring the cost of a oil tank removal, passing that on to the prospective owner. And then either it sits as it is, or as soon as they want to upgrade it, they have to conform to new building standards.
Tony, you want to take that? If you don't, I'll certainly do it. But go ahead.
Well, in order to do that, you'd have to go to town meeting and change the vote, right? So the town meeting article that was passed in 2021 directing us, that we have to demo them and sell them as vacant lots.
Right, but the demo cost was $160,000, not $700,000. So I'm sure we could get a town meeting, get enough people to change that if we needed to.
Yeah, or just to start, the reason we aren't proposing that is because we're trying to live within the existing town meeting vote, which, again, that recommendation went through years and years of committee public process and public meetings. Certainly the information we have today is new, and wasn't available back then. But I think there were other factors involved in why the committee had recommended that. I think, they met a lot with had neighbors from that particular neighborhood. Part of those public meetings, talking about, the need to upgrade those properties so that they're more consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, by leveling them and forcing new construction. You're encouraging new growth, which is a new tax base for the town. So I guess those are a couple off the top of my head as to why, they decided to go with the selling them as vacant lots decision.
So a new
I would add-
town meeting could straighten that out then and elect to sell them as is for a fixed amount to give the town enough money to pay off our loan, but then put restrictions on it so that we could create new growth in the future.
let me just
give
add,
some historical context. Sorry.
Scott, I'm sorry. Let me just add one more thing to this, as Tony mentioned, that I think it's imperative that the town clean these sites appropriately before any transfer of title goes on. There are provisions under, Dan, you can talk to this better than I, 21E sites. We want to make sure that when we transfer this property, these titles to a new owner, that these properties are clean and safe and remediated, because we are not going to be exposed to future lawsuits if they're not. So I would be opposed to selling them as is. I think it's important that when we do sell them, that we have certified that the properties are clean and remediated of any hazardous waste.
But that would be a condition of the sale. And if the condition of the sale says you must do this in order to buy it,
Not
then
under-
the town is
Not under-
relieved.
No, that's not correct, Peter. Under 21E, the owner, the original owner is responsible. So we'd be on the hook.
Can I just provide a little historical context for Peter? So, Peter, you probably know, but in case you don't, there was a Coast Guard housing committee formed. They met for over 5 years with over 50 open public meetings. And with 12 lots, there's, as you can imagine, there's literally dozens of possible configurations you could come up with, 2 for open space, 1 for public housing, 9 for single family, and they looked at many, many different configurations, including the one I think that you just described. And it took 6 years to get it, to the town meeting to vote on it. And the town voted, and we're a democracy. So that's the plan. Like you, I think, yeah, is this exactly how I would have done it if I was king and deciding on my own? Probably not, but this is what the voters voted on. So
the point I'm bringing up is, yeah, they went through 5 years of stuff and they came back and said, we need $165,000 to rip these down and good to go. However, now later, it's not $165,000. It's almost $700,000. And that's a crazy increase over a couple of years. I mean, even inflation considered, going from 165 to 700,000, 650, blah, 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 is a crazy increase. How could that be that wrong? And so if it's that wrong, we need to think of a new solution, in my opinion. And we could do something. We could have a special town meeting and rescind the previous vote and say, yeah, we'll sell them for $300,000 per lot, given the deed restrictions that they remove the underground tanks and bring such and such up to standard. And if any other improvements are made to the property, it has to be brought up to special current building standards. It seems like something the town could do if they had the desire to do.
Dan, let me ask you, can the town pass off remediation obligations in this
No,
regard?
21A is pretty strict, and it's designed to expand the universe of liable parties to encompass as many people as they can. They're called PRPs, potentially responsible properties. And that would include any former owner, any current owner, anyone who may have contributed to any sort of issues in the past. Keep in mind, we've had this issue already over at Bailey's Hill, where we had to do some remediation to pull out some earth that may have been contaminated by tanks that were there when that place was a depot for the military. So yeah, 21E does not give us the ability to just sort of, what's the word I want to use, delegate, put off, whatever the word you want to use, the responsibility to a buyer. That would be problematic.
So with that said, we are required to remediate the site.
Well, not required. Well, required pursuant to town meeting, yes. But in terms of the law, we're not required to it. But if someone buys it and they find it's contaminated, we're going to be on the hook for that.
We're going to be on the hook.
We just gave it to you and we told you it might be an issue. That's not going to fly. These laws are, like I said, they're designed to capture the most potential responsible parties, and that would be our owner. You bet.
So this plan, I know it does cost more than we anticipated, Peter, but this is the plan that was approved by town meeting.
Well, the approved by town meeting was 165K. Approved by the town meeting was 165K.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's now 650 blah 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 K
300
is significantly different. And the fact you're asking for 1 million is significantly different. So if we approved 165K and it got approved, why wasn't something started on any vacant spots? Regardless of whether there are still people in some of them or not, why wasn't something started? Why didn't we take advantage of that 165K quote to get them done?
I would advise.
Now it's like 5 times as much, and you're asking for 10 times as much.
Yeah, I would
Peter,
advise you to
haven't-
read the Finance Committee's report, Tony's explanation, the Finance Committee's explanation. I think they answer your questions of why we're taking this approach. And you know, as you said, it will be up to town meeting to approve or disapprove. And it's
Okay.
as easy as that.
But I think,
Okay.
you know, but
I'm done.
Peter, I think you asked a really good question. And it's a good, you know, alternative to consider. But I think that the liability issue that Dan identified there kind of gives us our answer. You know, that is too risky, something that the town really doesn't want to take, you know, to have on their shoulders. But if you read the letter to your last question, you know, why, and it was 300,000 that was approved. Original estimate was around 170, but ultimately it was 300,000 approved at 2021. But if you read that letter, it's 2 pages, and it explains to you in detail, you know, what the town's been going through, and in our efforts to, you know, get to where we are today. You know, it's certainly not dragging of the feet. There's a lot of things that we've done over the last 2 years, and a lot of challenges we've had to overcome. And it's all in that book. I hope you're able to read it. It definitely would answer your question. And then, you know, and lastly, you know, our job is trying to find the best, you know, trying to do financially what's best for the town. And you're going to get a better price for the remediation and the demolition in a bulk approach versus a, you know, doing it one by one. So that's why we were, you know, that's in part why we are, you know, today versus 2 years ago. But there's a lot of other stuff that we've had to do before then. You know, getting a confirmatory deed settled, getting a A&R settled with the planning board, you know, working our way through the eviction process and getting the properties vacated. You know, you got to do those things before you start thinking about, you know, procuring demolition. You know, there's a very systematic approach to how we, you know, look at this. All right, so
Just to be clear, everyone agrees it stinks that the bids came in higher than anticipated, but that's what happened. It stinks, but that's what happened. And it's not like we got 1 bid, we got 6 bids, and that's the low bid. So, yeah, nobody disagrees that
But-
we wish it was lower.
Well, let me just throw in though, but higher, like more, just a little bit higher or a lot of bit higher. These are
It's a lot of
crazy
it higher.
higher.
Absolutely. We're all in
These are
agreement.
crazy
It's a lot
higher. And it's like, it's either a failure of the beginning estimate that wasn't close enough, or we didn't act quick enough. Like, how did it go from 160 to 650? That's
well, again,
great in 3 years. That's not even inflation. That's crazy higher.
Peter, if you look at the the bids, which are, you know, they're priced. Each category of that bid is priced out. The demolition, now again, this is only for 9 units. And I admittedly am saying that the committee had estimated around, you know, 300,000 for 12. But for the 9, The demolition actually is about 300,000. It's the remediation, and that is adding remediation and transport costs. Trucking industry, no one could have predicted the impact that was going to be put on that industry. And so if you look
But
at
why would that not be communicated in an estimate? It's like me saying, I'll fix your computer for $100, but for me to come over to your house is $300. So the whole total is $400. Like,
yeah,
you
well, I
can't
mean, I
say
think that
like,
the committee did say there, ultimately it's going to be the procurement price, but no, they did not do an assessment of the building materials at the time of the meeting.
so we're admitting all around that it's just crazy wrong. It's not 160, it's 650.
It's not 300,000. It's 670 for 9.
Yeah.
But
Not even the whole thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Peter, you've heard it. You've heard it from us. We're not shying away from the fact that that it's crazy higher. It's not something that
Right.
any of us are.
And I guess my point that I'm bringing up is originally when we were talking with people years ago, they were saying it's 160. It's not 300. It's not 600. It's not 670 or whatever. They were like, it's 160 something, blah, blah, blah. Let's appropriate some money and get it done. And the people in the town said, yes, let's do that. It turns out that's not the case. It's not 160 something. It's not 300 something. It's well over 600,000, which becomes a huge financial burden on the taxpayers in the town. That's all I'm getting at is
Yeah.
it's a big deal that
But if you
somehow
go down
something
that-
went wrong a couple of years ago that was quoted very, very, very low. And we said, yeah, sure, we'll give you 300,000. And now that's not only not enough, but you're asking for another $1 million.
Tony, can I just jump in? The tax burden to the town will be so much greater if we don't remediate these sites than if we borrow this money and remediate the sites. Because if we don't do that, then the $1.8 million that is due in 2025 will hit the tax base. Right? And we're trying to prevent that from happening. If we remediate the sites, we take the proceeds, we sell the sites, we take the proceeds of the sites, pay off the debt, then there'll be no impact to the taxpayer at all.
Right. But on a conservative estimate, you still end up with 1.7 million in profit after paying both those things off. So yes, I just want to say, Peter, I think you're asking a very valid question. You're making a very valid point. But given where we are today, based on the things that how we've answered your question, we still feel that what we're recommending is the best path forward and is the least risky for the town and for the taxpayers.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Annette, I see you're unmuted.
Yes.
Did
So
you
I
have
do.
the-
So
Yeah.
I'm Annette Jacoby. I'm at 91 Wilson Road. I wasn't sure how to raise my hand.
Yep.
So I do have 2 questions. One is, have you and/or would American Environmental consider doing an exercisable option for the final 3 houses? And you'd have to put contractual terms around it, but that would be executed within, I don't know, 3 years, some window.
So yes, I've reached out to American Environmental and asked them. So the way that procurement law works is you can do a change order to your original bid for not more than 25% of the original bid. So I asked American Environmental if if it was possible, if those other 3 properties were vacant while they were on site,
Mhm.
they'd be able to do those for 25% of 670,000, which I forget what the number worked out to be. And they said yes, but only if it was while they were out there. If they finished the 9 and then, left town, then they wouldn't be able to do it. It would be likely that, there's mobilization costs that they would have to incur again to come back. That, if it doesn't time up that way, then, you're likely procuring again, the final 3 properties, which then is going to probably cost more than, per house than what we're getting now because of the additional mobilization costs.
Right.
But
no,
again, I don't know that for a fact. It really, you don't know until, you could have, when we put this bid out, there could have been a company more local that it wouldn't cost as much to mobilize, but was really busy and couldn't put a bid into the procurement process at the time.
Mhm.
So that could, you really don't know until you actually do the procurement what that final price is going to be. But yeah, we did ask, and they
Okay.
said yes, they'd be able to do it for a 25% change order.
And 25%, just so you know, works out to 167,250 divided by 3, 55,750 per house. So it does confirm there is an economy of scales. So it
Yes.
would be, yes, as you suspected, much more economical if we could do that.
But they want to do it, contingent with doing the 9 so that they don't have to remobilize. And
That's right.
that would be the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that we thought about, trying to ask that. And the other one is sort of a pretty simple type of math problem. So if we had 300 approved and we get 1 million approved, we wind up at 1.3 million. And then if we take the 669 plus the 69 at 738, I see that we would have a contingency of 561 as opposed to 339. Have some other costs been incurred, or am I doing my math wrong?
There's the original contract price that we're using the 300,000 to fund with Axiom was about $70,000.
Yes.
So that brings that down to, around 230. And then the bid for the 9 units is 669,000. If you divide that by 9, it adds up to about $74,500 per household.
Yes.
So what we did was then we said, all right, let's times that by 3. If we'd have to go, we're trying to estimate it as best we can if we had to procure it again, and it came into about the same price. And that's how we kind of came up with that contingency there. We also think that there's going to be additional costs, professional service costs with Axiom, with potential oversight of the remediation process. There's going to be potential professional service costs associated with the procurement process of selling the property.
Okay.
And preparing the property for sale. So if the sidewalks are really bad, I put that in there, but honestly, we have sidewalk money approved, other, avenues. So if needed, we could go use those funds for that if we had to. But some part of the motion says, preparing the land for sale, and God forbid there's any sort of soil contamination around the underground storage tanks. There'd be costs associated, unknown costs associated with remediating that too. So that's why we're adding the additional contingency of 339,898.
Yes, and so then that leaves a little bit of a margin if Axiom needs some extra consulting. But the 339 would hopefully cover the final.
Yeah, and again, while we're going to town meeting to ask for authority to borrow up to $1 million, we wouldn't necessarily borrow up to $1 million. You know, if it was approved Tuesday night, we wouldn't go and borrow $1 million Wednesday. We would just borrow what we need to get this project done. And then once those other properties are vacated, you know, we borrow the rest.
Gotcha.
Once we do a procurement, if we have to do a procurement, we have enough money to do it, you know, so we wouldn't necessarily borrow $1 million right away.
Yes. Yeah, you'll just go get it as it deems required.
Yeah,
Okay, good. Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you for those questions. Suzanne.
Hi, Suzie Macarelli, 15 Little Nahant Road. I guess we're all representing Little Nahant tonight. My question has to do with the 2021 vote specifically. I agree with you, Josh. Democracy is important. I also believe that all aspects of the 2021 vote should be honored, specifically selling all 12 lots. However, I've attended or watched all of the housing committee meetings. And in every one of those meetings, it has been discussed specifically to sell off enough of the Coast Guard housing lots to pay off the loan, and then revoting that to find out if the Nahant residents would want to give a portion of those lots to be built as affordable housing. So my question is, since that was talked about as of just last Thursday, last week, as one of the five sort of potential sites on the short list for affordable housing, why should the Nahant residents pay to clear the lots that could potentially be turned over to a developer for affordable housing if that were to pass at next May's annual town meeting? Why not, if that were to pass at May's annual town meeting 9 months from now, why not just have that developer pay to clear those lots? Why should the burden be on us?
That's a great question. So a little bit back to Peter's question, you know, with the 21E factor, either way, you're going to want to remediate properties before selling them to a new owner, whether it be, you know, no matter what that future owner is, so that there isn't future liability to the town. That's one piece of it. Another piece of that is I think it would be relative in the sale cost of the property. So you probably, you know, selling vacant lots versus selling lots that, you know, a developer would need to demo, they're going to factor that in to their proposal. So the town would likely make less in that scenario too. Just another way to think of that. But, you know, while we're aware of what, you know, housing production plan would like to see there, and, you know, and other, you know, committees like open space, you know, is another topic that came up a lot in the past. You know, anything like that, you know, as you said, would require a town meeting vote. You know, for me, I'll just say as a you know, CFO, so to speak, for the town, you know, the 1.8 million is the most important factor, I think, in this whole conversation, because the town, you know, we don't have 1.8 to pay. So, you know, for me, you know, my goal is to make as much progress as possible so that we can get that paid off with the proceeds of the sale of, you know, these properties, so that, it doesn't end up on the burden of the town. Because otherwise, we'd have to think about either borrowing to pay it off, which would be more debt, more interest rate, and kicking the can down the road. We'd have to think about a, debt exclusion override to ask residents to come up with the 1.8, which certainly, is nothing I want to go down. I don't want to do that. Or we'd have to find a way to pay for it out of our general fund, which would be impossible without cuts to services or staffing. Mark or Josh or Gene, do you want to add to that?
I think you covered it pretty well, Tony. Regardless what happens to this site, right now, I think me as one member of the Board of Selectmen have one thing in front of them, and that is the 2021 town meeting vote. And that's how I'm proceeding. I know that the housing production plan, which I committee, which I am part of, may have other recommendations, but those recommendations will be put if they're moved upon, they'll be put before town meeting. But that's down the road. Right now, I'm operating under the premise that we have a town meeting vote of 2021, and that's the direction I'm proceeding. And if something changes between now and 2025, well, that will be a matter of town meeting. But regardless of what you do, you need to remediate the site.
Suzanne, does that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the explanation. I guess I was just thinking that, if we sold 6 lots for 300,000, which is really, really low, but I'm just throwing that out as a very conservative number, that's 1.8 million. Can't we just appropriate enough to clear 6 lots, pay off the loan, revote it in May, and that's only 9 months from now. I don't know how much clearing and demoing and selling can happen in the next 9 months. Why not revisit it in May?
I think we've for 5 years plus, we've kicked the can down the road, and we've gotten to the point where our backs are against the wall in terms of expiring a debt. And Suzanne, you're doing what everybody else is doing. You're facing the reality of this and coming up with thoughts and ideas of how else we can deal with it. And I like hearing them, but I don't know that we're in a position to do that.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I can't vote yes, but I appreciate the explanation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Enzo?
Tony?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, Chapter 21E is driven by financial institutions, basically. There isn't a financial institution on this earth that will lend money on any of those properties unless you do a 21E. So that really kind of, voids out anything else. You have to remediate them. They have to be pulled, and it has to be cleared. I would agree with that. The question I have is, well, first of all, I disagree with Dan. 21Es, I mean, usually, because I have one done. I owned a gas station. And I know from the past that I would be the sole responsible party if there was contamination on my property, even though somebody else might have done it previously. The other part of that is, the other question I have for you is, out of there's only 10 tanks left. Am I correct?
11.
How many tanks were pulled?
1.
I thought there was 2 that were pulled. Is that one tank, or the 1 or 2 tanks that were pulled, are they on the properties that are currently have people in them?
No, I think I'm pretty sure it's just 1, because if there's only 1 above ground tank, on the backside of one of those units. It's on the corner Goddard Drive. I believe it's one of the vacant properties.
Okay, so that's two. So if they're both vacant, then that helps because you've eliminated two of the tanks. But there isn't a financial institution that will, I can tell you right now, that will say, sure, you can buy these as is with fuel tanks on them. They're going to say, get them out. And they're going to say, we're not going to give you any money until you get them out. So I would agree with the remediation. What I disagree with is the amount of money, and again, because it's 660, 679, then the next one up is even higher. Why do we have to mitigate all this? I'm assuming there's asbestos in there. I mean, most of those houses that were built in the 50s have asbestos floor tiles and all that. So do they have a mitigation plan? Where does this all get trucked to, and why is the cost so much higher? I don't understand that. I don't understand how it can go from 170,000 plus the extra 70,000 that was thrown on there to make it up to the 300,000. It went from there to almost over $1 million.
And so the first thing I would question is the 170,000. Where did that number come from? And as I said earlier, I mean, I wasn't part of it at the time, but I'm not sure the Coast Guard Housing Committee was given the resources that were probably necessary to determine what the cost of was actually going to be. And to be honest with you, I don't know if you were a member of the board at the time, but I don't know where they got that number. And apparently it wasn't a good number.
All right. Well, they did. I talked to the chairman of the committee, and he said that they got them from contractors and
Okay. I don't know.
that had come in and looked over the property. But that's besides the point now. That's over and done with because you've got some pretty high prices.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
We considered.
my concern isn't really the buildings. It's the fuel tanks. And the other thing is, I don't believe those properties were ever subdivided. Am I correct?
So it didn't go through a subdivision process. It went through an A&R process with
Right.
the planning board, and that's been registered with the registry of deeds. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so once you do that, you have to understand that if that's one big parcel, that's one big property, that's one big parcel. So if one of those tanks is leaking, now you've incorporated the whole area as a hazardous waste site. You do understand that. Am I right, Dan?
Well, it depends on what the environmental company would say. That could be true, but I think we're all hoping that's not the case. But as everyone is saying, we're trying to make sure that's not an issue, and that's why we are where we are.
Okay, so then why doesn't the town subdivide those lots? Because if I have a lot, if I own a lot, it's a 10,000, one of those 10,000 square foot lots or whatever they are, and Dan, you own one, you buy one and I buy one. My tank is leaking. My piece of property will have to be mitigated. You have to pull the tank and you have to clean it up, but yours won't. Yours is exempt from that because it's separate. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think they are. They're subdivided, but it wasn't a subdivision process. It was a
Approval not required.
process. Yeah. So they
They are
are properties.
They are subdivided.
So
Either
they
they
are
are or
separated,
they're
right?
not.
Just to be
Right?
clear, they are
Are they
separated.
not?
I actually have the lot. I actually have all the lots because I was part of it. Yes. I mean, I wasn't part of the committee. No, but I had the whole subdivision, but it was never approved at town meeting. So that's one big lot. That's a problem. So
Dan, can you comment on that? I mean,
Well,
isn't
no,
it?
it's the subdivision has been approved. It didn't have to go through the approval process. Approval's not required. It didn't have to go through the usual subdivision process because it has plenty of frontage. So that is an exception to the subdivision regulations. So there are already lots parsed out, 12 lots ready to go. There's a plan for it. So they are subdivided in the legal sense. And they
Okay.
will be subdivided in a practical sense once they're sold off. But there is a
Okay,
plan. You probably saw the plan.
that was my question. That was my worry, that if they weren't, then you have one big parcel, you have one tank in the middle leaking, and all of a sudden now, oh boy, you have a problem throughout the whole parcel.
Yeah, that absolutely could be true for sure.
So, well, if they're subdivided, if you did the A&R, then you'll be safe.
Yeah, well, that's what we did. That's one of the reasons why it's taking a little while. We had to go to the planning board to get that done. So that took some time too.
And that's the map in the very back of the book, Enzo. The very last page of the book. You can see the A&R there.
So
Okay.
you're confirming that it's been done.
Okay. That's the only thing I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Peter, you unmuted. What were you? I didn't catch what you were asking.
I was just asking, so as a follow-up to his question, you're confirming that has been done and they're all 12 separate lots versus one big lot?
Yes.
Yes.
That was Enzo's question. So you're
Yes.
confirming it's been done. Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else on the call that has a question or comment?
Okay. Thanks, Tony. Good job. We're going to move on now. Preserving East Point. Josh, you've been the spokesperson on this. I don't know of any developments up to this point.
Yeah, no developments. Just to recap from the last meeting, all the depositions have been given, and I think there's a hearing. Now I'm forgetting the dates. I want to say September. The lawyers think the judge will make his decision on the validity claim in January. Is the most likely time.
That's what I heard. Okay. Thanks, Josh. Okay, town administrators report.
We begun excavation at the Little Nahant Playground for this the CPC funded project. They will begin forming for the footings for the shipwreck tomorrow. Concrete gets poured early next week, and the equipment gets delivered and installed early the following week, pending any weather situation. But it's we've started that project. We also today were successfully repaired a stormwater outfall pipe on Tudor Beach, which is going to be a significant improvement to our stormwater system in that area of town. On Willow Road, Emerald Road, and White Way area. Zach and I met with mosquito control today out on the golf course and walked our stormwater ditch system. This is, we developed quite a good relationship with mosquito control and, discussed this year's and future year projects related to, making sure that water is flowing and not stagnant. They've treated over 30,000 catch basins in Essex County already for mosquitoes. And they're concerned this year because of the amount of rain that we've received this summer. So they're eager to come get into Nahant. They've already treated our catch basins and will be helping us this fall and winter, with our stormwater system as well. So that's
Just want to add, Tony, that the Little Nahant Playground material is being used on the back side of the dunes as permitted by Concom. And Zach says he'll be planting that with seagrass when that's all settled. So it's kind of a two for one operation over there. Nice to see that finally coming together. And the drain, I had a chance to talk to Zach today. That drain, as you explained to me, Tony, has been apparently broken for some number of years. And it's impressive the amount. This is a drain that's on Willow Road. It goes out into Tudor Beach, roughly at the bottom of Ocean Street. And it drains an impressive area. Emerald Road and White Way. And so hopefully residents in that area will see an improvement in their drainage. So it's nice to get that one done.
And I failed to mention, they also cleared the end of the outfall pipe at the bottom of Tri Mountain Road as well, which hadn't been cleared in a few years too. So, I got to commend the DPW on their efforts. A lot of it is MS4 permitting related efforts, and standard maintenance, but these are, critical assets for the town. And, with this increased amount of rainfall, and they're more necessary than ever. So they're doing a good job in that regard.
Yeah, it's definitely, it was good to hear too, that we're really getting our money worth out of this Essex County. All the towns put into this fund doesn't, Zach was explaining a lot of towns don't even take advantage of it, and we're taking advantage of it and then some. We've had them while they were here extend some of the dredging in the golf course area for pennies on the dollar. So nice job to you and Zach for really getting our money's worth out of that Essex County mosquito control.
Yeah.
Great. Is that it, Tony?
Yes.
Okay, citizens forum.
Hello.
Yes. Hold on a sec, George.
Yep.
Peter's before you. We'll come right back to you.
Okay. As I mentioned before, I got a couple issues and I'll just spew them out and then I'll mute and let you guys talk them through. First is the police radar thing that's being retired, and that's fine. At first in conversation, they said, hey, it's in good shape, but we're getting rid of it. Secondly, in private conversation, I've heard it costs $3,000 to replace the batteries. It doesn't work and it can't be repaired. Now, my point is, coming from a computer guy point of view, everything can be repaired. So if we're getting rid of it and we're done with it, that's one thing. But if we're getting rid of it now and next year you're going to ask for $10,000 or $12,000 or $15,000 for a new one, I'm wondering why we aren't pursuing new batteries and a repair. That's number one. Second thing, considering trash collection and one barrel collection and whatever, Nahant residents enjoy the fact that although, 48 weeks out of the year, they put out one barrel and it's collected, the fact that twice a year you might clean out your basement or your attic or your storage unit and have extra things to put out is a significant advantage over some of these communities that have moved into the one barrel model. So my question is, what is the price difference going from our current model to a one barrel model? and divided by the 3,300 people in town, is that advantage big enough to make it worth it? Or if it's only $2 per person or whatever, should we preserve the fact that we can put out a swing set that we took down or a shed that we took down or once a year event that we did, versus the one barrel, one house all year long, no matter what? Those are my two issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. The police radar trailer was purchased in 2002. It's 2023. The trailer structure itself is riddled with rust, so it would need some fairly significant repairs. It's older technology. Batteries cost a lot and don't charge, don't hold their charge as well. It also doesn't do things like new radar signs, such as traffic counting. It doesn't measure, how many cars pass by it, at what speeds, at how much are they over the speed limit, like our pole mounted signs that we have deployed around town. So there's,
So you're anticipating buying a new one after this one is gone?
yes,
Okay, so that should be, I would think, thrown in as, yes, this is excess, but aside from the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 repair, we're now going to have to have a $10,000, $15,000 purchase in the future. That's, I think, what taxpayers want to know about.
yeah, I think we've already bought batteries for this thing a couple of times. It's already gone through repairs. I think getting 20 something years of use out of it shows that the town has done its due diligence to keep it alive as long as possible without having to buy something new. It's reached its end of life. So, that's.
But a little work on it, new batteries and a little electronics works would put it back in shape for minimal cost versus getting rid of this one and buying a new one for how much? Do we know how much a new one cost?
I don't know off the top of my head, but you're talking
10,
about
10,
repeated,
15.
you're talking about a repeated maintenance cost versus purchasing something new that isn't going to cost you anything in the next 5 years or 2 years.
Yes.
Or 3 years.
I understand that. And what I do for a business is computer life cycle. So we have to determine, is it worth fixing what we have versus trashing it and buying a new one at full cost or not? And it sounds like this one quote was, one person said, well, there's 3,000 for battery and it cannot be repaired. Frankly, I don't believe that because I'm in computers and I know that everything can be repaired. If the whole thing could be done with $3,000 worth of batteries and $4,000 worth of repair, is that still significantly less than buying a new one?
Yeah.
That would be the
I don't know
responsible
where-
thing. That would be the responsible thing as a taxpayer. I'd want to know.
Yes, I don't know where you got the $3,000 cost for batteries.
It was a text. It was sent in this Zoom thing, and if you want me, I can publish it, but I won't. But the thing is, when I asked the question in chat, someone said it's $3,000 to put new batteries in, and it doesn't work. And so that made me think, well, wait a minute, it doesn't work. Could we spend $2,000 with an electrical technician and have him put a new component in, a new logic board or whatever, and make it work? And so for 2 + 3 is 5, there we have it. And now it's going to be good for another 10 years. That makes sense to me as a taxpayer. But just turning around and saying, oh, this is really old. We got a great life out of it. We're going to go with it and kill it. And then next year you're going to say, and by the way, we need $15,000 to buy a new one. To me, is not taxpayer responsibility. That's what I'm getting at.
All right,
Hey,
good point.
Tony,
Good, wait a minute, Gene, good point, Peter, but, you know, you'll have that vote at town meeting next year, this next year, as well every other taxpayer. But I don't know how many, people are driving around in 22-year-old cars either nowadays. But there is a life cycle to everything. And,
yeah, but that-
and I applaud the police department for keeping this going for 20-something years. And as Tony said, the new radar machines or the traffic control machines add a lot more data that can be collected and be useful to the town. So I think we got our money out of this one.
So how much are the new machines, and when is that purchase going to come to the town?
Well, if it does, we'll be at town meeting. You'll be able to vote on it, Peter.
Yeah, and how much is it?
We don't know yet.
Okay, so we're going to retire something we have because we don't want to repair it with an unknown cost of repairing in order to then ask for a new expensive thing in the future because we need one because we don't have one.
Yes.
That's what we're
Yeah.
saying.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
not what I'm-
That
that's not
clears
what
up
I'm-
a lot for me. It clears up a
Okay.
lot. Thank you.
That's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying, Peter, which is, I understand you're stepping into this, in one moment. The department has been, keeping this thing alive for 20 years. You don't know how much money we've spent in it. You don't know what's wrong with it. And you don't know what the future cost could be. So it's not really a fair characterization of how we're treating this situation. And I think that we do a very good job, especially when you're talking about a 20-something-year-old trailer that's rusted and the computer system isn't, there's all sorts of issues with it. It's not a failed story here. This isn't the town's not, making a lazy financial decision here. Keeping something
All right.
alive 20-something
So
years.
that brings back my point is before we retire this one, let's get the cost of a new one and tell people, hey, we're getting rid of our old one because it will cost $6,000 to fix it, but the new one will be $15,000 and will be worth it.
Well,
That is
there's
What we're
another,
saying, hold on, Jane. What we're saying, Peter, is we're not going to put any more money into this machine.
okay, there's another way of looking at this, Tony. As opposed to auctioning this off, is there any trade-in value to it? Most of these companies can take and refurbish these and put them back out at a pretty good price.
I've been speaking with Chief Furlong, and I didn't, ask that particular question, but his comments were the repair, whoever he sends this thing for repairs said it's not worth it to keep putting money into this 20-year-old trailer.
so I
Frame
guess
it.
my next question is, we have a number of the pole mounted units around town. I don't know how many we have. I know we have at least 2, but I think you alluded to at least 2 more. So we have how many around town? 4?
4 or 5.
Okay. And the cost of the pole mounted units on areas that might be, let's call speedy, would that be a better investment to add more of those than a portable trailer thing that gets moved around from place to place? That because of the cost of a trailer hitch, axle, wheels, etc., might be excessive cost. Would the cost of the trailer thing be 15,000, but the cost of the pole mounted things be 3,000? Meaning we could bet 5 more pole mounted ones instead of a trailer one. I'm just looking out for where we're spending our money. It seems like we're reducing this thing, and next year you're going to ask for a bunch of money for a new one. And I know from
Peter,
a computer point of view,
Right.
everything can be
Peter,
fixed.
Peter, let
Yeah.
me say this. The Board of Selectmen have already voted on this. The vote has been taken to surplus this piece of equipment. Any future decision on what if it's going to be replaced or how it's going to be replaced will be made at town meeting. And obviously, you're welcome to come and voice your opinion at that point. But we're going to continue on at this point, Tony. Thank you.
I will agree with that, except for the fact that you seem to have voted to do something and the public's voice wasn't heard. Because this is the first time I've heard of this, and suddenly we're asking to approve that you voted to get rid of a piece of equipment for whatever reason. That is my question: is this a good
Good
use of
question,
taxpayers' money?
As you said,
Yeah.
you've got your question. We understand your point of view. And our response to that is that, we're making the appropriate decision based on the information that we have. We feel that 20-year life out of this piece of equipment is a success story, not the opposite. So appreciate your comments, and you have a different point of view on that. But it's, we're deciding
Okay.
that it's
Okay.
a less
Moving on.
it's
That's
a
fine.
worse
That's fine.
financial decision to continue to dump money into a dying piece of equipment than to.
And the reason I bring this up is because we declare, police cars unusable anymore, and they get sold to the public, and I see them driving around town for another 10 years. So what I'm watching out for is taxpayers paying for a new thing just because someone decided we don't want to fix it anymore. Let's buy a new one. It's got great new snappy features. And that all comes back on the taxpayer dime. That's all I'm saying. So I know that you have your point. I have my point. It's on record. You guys can move on.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you.
Any others?
Hello?
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, hi there. I don't know how you guys do it. People tell me I have a lot of good ideas and run for selectmen, but I don't have the temperament you guys have. I don't quite understand. I wish I did, and tell you the truth. Just a couple of quick questions. First of all, Tony, thank you for the playground down here in Little Nahant. I was happy to see the little mini front end loader down there digging up the spot for the new excuse me, sets of playthings are going down there. One question about that is any way we can get a little fence around that, because that is a pretty high volume road right there, and cars do go, kind of fast there because it is, again, a main road. I noticed that up behind the public library, they have a fenced in area there, which I think would alleviate some of the parents' concerns that their children might run out into the road. That'd be one of my questions. But again, I want to thank you for all the work you've done to get that to fruition, and it made my heart feel real good to see that done. Second is the short-term rentals. I'm a little confused about this. I thought the town voted that we don't want any short-term rentals, non-owner occupied short-term rentals in any residential areas in the Nahant. And we were supposed to get an answer back from the Attorney General sometime this month, I guess. It was supposed to be in August, but through a couple of meetings, you guys saying that something was, slowed down or whatever. Government sometimes moves at a glacial pace. But now all of a sudden I'm hearing something about federal this, federal that. I don't understand that. I know there's towns and cities, and I just read an article about New York City as being non-owner occupied short-term rentals in the city. So what is going on with short-term rentals? It seemed like you guys just kind of fluffed over it. What do you mean by federally this and federally that? I thought the Attorney General's role in this was to see if the vote that we took and how we did it was all above board and legal. And once that is so, if they deem it's legal, then it's up for us, the town, the Board of Selectmen, what's the other board? No, I can't think of the other board's name.
Planning board.
The planning board. Aren't they supposed to follow the rules, not the rules, but the wants of the town and not fight amongst themselves saying, well, we don't really want this, so we got to find other ways around this. Aren't they supposed to abide by what the town people voted for? So if we voted for this, the Attorney General says it's legal, then shouldn't they be working on a plan of how to implement this rule? Again, I'm a little confused. I mean, it seems like we're getting, I don't understand, in other
Let me
words,
try
what's
to
going
help
on.
you out. Sorry to cut you off. I'll try to
Yeah,
answer.
no problem. I
No, you
just,
can't.
yeah, go ahead.
So on the Little Nahant Playground, fence isn't in the current budget, but it's something that, we can revisit with the neighborhood and, in the future, but it's not part of the current plan.
Okay,
And then on this, any bylaw change that a town votes in has to be approved by the Attorney General. So, we're waiting on the Attorney General to give us, the approval of the bylaw. So it's not, there isn't any sort of like, inside baseball here at the town. We just can't implement a bylaw that hasn't been approved by the Attorney General. So we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to hear from them, from that office. But there's nothing, the town isn't holding it up in any regard.
Dan, could you speak on the federal part of it that George?
I can. And George has a good point. And that's actually the conversation I had with the Attorney General's office last week. Their scope of review in this circumstance is state law and the state constitution. And there's nothing that I saw in the state law or state constitution that would prevent the vote that what the town meeting was passed. But there's a small but, so to speak. There's a federal considerations in terms of the interstate commerce clause, where some federal courts, mostly from the South, are saying that you cannot discriminate against people that are from another state in the form of a ban on non-owner occupied short-term rentals. Because what they're saying essentially is someone from New Hampshire can't own a home in Nahant and then use it as a short-term rental property. These federal courts are saying that is a violation of federal constitutional law. That's beyond, in my mind, that's beyond the scope of the state Attorney General's review. But that being said, they're still taking a harder look at it to make sure that they give us good insight, because in many circumstances, the Attorney General's office is the municipal law unit of the Attorney General's office out of Worcester. They'll issue an opinion, say, okay, yeah, we're going to approve this, but know that there's all this case law that brings up some really substantial federal issues. And that's the letter I expect to get, or that we expect to get from the Attorney General's office within the next month or two. That's what I think they're going to approve it, but they're going to say, you got to keep in mind that there are some case law out there in the federal realm that puts this sort of circumstance, maybe not in jeopardy, but certainly in question.
yeah, but my question, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony. I'm Daniel.
No, and Tony's right. We're just in a holding pattern. There's nothing for us to do right now. There's nothing.
You had mentioned, my question to that, or I guess question to that is, we're not asking to ban non-owner occupied short-term rentals in the Nahant. We're asking, and we voted on it, and the town accepted it, to ban non-owner occupied short-term rentals in residential areas only, not in commercial areas. So we're not banning it outright. So I don't understand. That to me sounds like it's off case. In other words, about someone from, because most of these non-owner occupied short-term rentals, especially here in Little Nahant, they're not people that live in town. So that's not the question. The question is, they're in residential areas. And the town resoundingly said they don't want them in residential areas. So where would the federal government come in and tell us we can't do that? I can understand they can say you can't ban short-term rentals in a commercial area, but where it's been done other places, we're not asking to ban it outright in the town. We're just banning it in residential areas.
Well, we just got to wait and see what the Attorney General says, George.
Okay. And one more question, I'll let you guys go.
Yeah.
What is going on with the crosswalk down on Wilson Road at the new Joe Moshe house, with lack of better words, about the railing you said it needed to put down on the stairs? Is the town responsible for that? And if so,
No.
when will they put the railing down there?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the railing to get installed to really like to install a crosswalk / encourage people to use the right of way because there is no railing there yet.
Correct.
Don't want to see any, I don't want to encourage anybody down the steps and potentially get hurt.
No, I understand that.
So I'll follow up with the contractor, but I know the order was placed. I don't know when the install is scheduled for.
Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. God bless you for tonight. You did an awesome job.
Thank you.
Hey, Tony, before we finish up on that subject on the fence, you know, I feel compelled to bring it up again because we're gonna be opening that park up to more kids, more dogs, more opportunities. I won't call them opportunities, possibilities of somebody running out into the street. Can we find some money somewhere to put a safety fence of some sort there?
There is a fence,
There is a
yeah.
fence on the road. I think what George is questioning is, should we fence in the entire playground area? But there is a fence between the playground and the Nahant Road.
Yeah, it extends pretty far to either side of the playground, but yes, it isn't enclosed. That's correct.
So, I mean, the answer to can we find money? I mean, first I would want to talk to the neighborhood and really make sure that, you know, it's something that, you know, that area is like in favor of. But if we think it's a public safety issue, then, you know, we could go forward anyways. However, no, we don't have any money in our budget for that project because it's never been brought up before. So I don't have a cost estimate. You know, I don't have it in the budget. So, you know, that would be something that you'd want to find out, you know, what type of fencing, how many feet of it, what's it going to get a cost estimate, and then propose it, you know, to be funded at a future town meeting.
Could you use
Okay.
any CPA money for that?
That also would be approved through a town meeting vote.
Okay, it's just a thought. I'm just worried about the children and the parents. Being a parent myself, but my child is now as a grown man. But knowing when he was younger, how again, I don't, the lack of words, how frightening it is sometimes when you see some of these situations where you let your child go, that you can't take your eye off them and relax. So the fence around there would be able to let the parents relax a little bit, know that their child is safe. And if they take their eye off them for 1 second, they're not going to end up on Nahant Road being run over by whatever happens to be. You know, so again, I want to let you guys go. It's a long night. And again, I applaud you for the way you guys handle yourselves. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Okay, anything else? Any other comments?
Michelle.
Hi, thank you. Michelle Capano, 29 Ocean Street. I just want to go back on the topic on short-term rentals. Dan, assuming that the AG approves the bylaw change and the changes to the table of uses, how long is the implementation date for those non-owner occupied properties to stop renting? Who notifies them? Who notifies the platform? And is that a responsibility of platforms or the town?
Well, I don't know if there was a provision, I don't remember if there was a provision in the bylaw that says this will take effect on a certain date, assuming it's approved, posted and published by the clerk and whatnot. I don't recall if that was an issue, but assuming there was not, the earliest time we could implement it is after it's approved and after it's published, after the approval is published and posted by Diane, the town clerk. And then it would be up to the good faith of the homeowner or the short-term rental owner to start the registration process. And in doing that, it would come to our attention that this is owner occupied, is owner adjacent, or whatever it might be. So
Yeah,
there is some
my
degree of
question is
self-support.
specific on non-owner occupied properties in Nahant, because that's the
Well, that's
bylaw.
the same answer, the same answer. They have to come and register. But to the extent there's some folks out there that aren't gonna follow the bylaws, and it'd be up to either the neighbors to file a request for enforcement or for the towns on how to look into issues that might be arising. But to some degree, the law relies on the good faith nature of the citizens to follow the bylaws. So that's, I think, does that answer your question?
So is the town prepared to receive notice from property owners for non-owner occupied Airbnbs that are in violation of the bylaw and to enact enforcement? What does enforcement consist of?
No,
Well,
no, we're
No,
not. No, we're
yeah,
not.
that's my point. So I guess
Keep
this
in
is a
mind,
topic
keep in
that
mind, Michelle, that was an amendment on the floor. It was not part of the recommendation. So that's something that, is gonna have to be worked out through the development of the regulations, should it be approved by the Attorney General. I don't think that amendment included any sort of fine structure or really detailed how the town wants us to enforce that. So it'll have to be developed through a regulation and that lives within the limits of the bylaw. It should be approved from the Attorney General.
So make sure I understand this correctly. Even though the bylaw passes, these non-owner occupied properties can still operate.
that's right. It doesn't matter whether they got passed, Michelle. It's whether the Attorney General approves it, and we're still waiting for that.
If
And
the
there's
Attorney
there's-
General approves the bylaw change and approves the change in the table of uses, you're saying that these non-owner occupied properties can still operate until regulations are put in place by the town.
There is going to be some startup time.
I mean,
Absolutely, as with anything. There's some
Well,
startup time.
if it gets approved by the AG and a request for enforcement came in, then I guess we could rely on some sort of fine structure that's within the current zoning bylaws. But we have not thought that through. That was, it was not part of, the committee's thought process leading up to town meeting. It was something new added at town meeting. So it wasn't thought through.
So I guess, and I'm happy to put this in writing, but I would ask that the Board of Selectmen consider either reconstituting the short-term rental committee to start drafting the regulations and not wait until the approval comes in, because we know regulations still need to be drafted, right? Either direction of the regulations coming through, and to get the work started. So you're not putting residents in an uncomfortable position with an enormous amount of complaints coming in because these non-owner occupied rentals are operating when they should not.
It's already started, Michelle. We're ahead of that. The short-term rental bylaw advisory committee had already drafted some draft regulations. We're already ready to go in terms of a good first step toward regulations. So it's already happened.
And does it include
But-
enforcement?
But to be fair, Dan, specifically, no discussion or work has been done on non-owner occupied in residential area, because that was not part of the original recommendation or work effort of that committee. That was something that came up as a floor amendment. So no, the that specifically to that point, which Michelle is bringing up, that's not something that the town or the committee or the selectmen, we're looking at ahead of town meeting. That was a floor amendment. So there hasn't been any work on that to this point.
So
Yeah.
I
so
guess
look,
back to
Michelle-
my comment.
Michelle,
So
let me just jump in for 1 second. So what passed the town meeting, we're waiting approval from the Attorney General, was owner occupied Airbnbs in residential sections. Now, that won't be part of the regulations because that will be part of the bylaw. All right, the regulations, as Dan said, we do have draft regulations that were developed with the short-term rental committee that the board will consider. So, I mean, we're just waiting at this point now for a decision by the Attorney General. I mean, that's not necessarily part of the regulation. Now, perhaps we could put a fine in the regulations that help us regulate that, but that's a bylaw.
I understand that, Mark, and I disagree to the intent of, we do not have the appropriate level of protection regarding non-owner occupied Airbnbs. And my request was to either bring the committee back together so they can start looking at it, so they're prepared. So when that approval does come into the AG, you have appropriate updates to the existing regulations.
I second that request.
I'm not quite sure what you're saying, Michelle. I mean, if we have a bylaw in place that says that.
But you don't have regulations in place to support the change that occurred in the bylaw on the floor. To Dan's point, the regulations.
Well, I think it's relatively minor, to be honest with you. I mean, I think what's important is getting the bylaw passed. And once the bylaw is passed, I mean, putting a few sentences in the regulations regarding that will be fairly simple. I mean, it's not going to take long, to be honest with you.
At the beginning of this meeting, I asked a very simple question, and that was whether or not we were going to continue with the subcommittee or form a new committee. And I think that's what Michelle is asking right now. I suggest that
I
we
think
look
the
at-
bylaw did, I think the town meeting vote did authorize that committee to be, reconstituted. So that part, is checked off, that task. Have they met since town meeting? No, they haven't. Dan has pulled up the regulations that they had, drafted when they were meeting prior to town meeting. And the next step in that process is to put a draft in front of the Board of Selectmen, and then really, publish a draft for public comment. What Michelle is saying is, be ready for when the AG, should the AG approve the bylaw, that you have regulations ready to go so that you're able to enforce the bylaw appropriately. I think and we stated earlier, Michelle, that is something that we have to get started on for sure.
Right, and that's why I'm asking, like, don't wait till the approval comes in from the AG. Get the committee to meet and start thinking through what those changes need to be so they're ready and in place.
Exactly.
If you wait and something happens and a resident will take action against the town because because it's been discussed and it's been raised. So let's try to avoid that.
But I think what Mark is saying as well is that, and again, I answered you no, because we haven't really, gone through the process of working out all the details yet. But, existing zoning, which this article that was passed at town meeting amended, likely authorizes some sort of enforcement tool to be utilized should anybody be non-compliant, that we could rely on when the AG, should the AG approve the bylaw, and we could probably use that even if regulations aren't approved yet. But that's something we do need to meet, discuss, and iron out sooner than later, is your point.
Tony, do we know whether or not any or all of those committee members will return?
Nope, I don't know, is my answer to that. I don't have any reason to suspect otherwise, but we have not asked them to meet to to start working on regs.
Right.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
Any more questions, Tony? It's getting late.
I
Yeah,
don't-
just one last thought on that. Can we have somebody contact them? The subcommittee members or the chairperson to see if there's gonna be some follow through?
Yeah, yeah. Is that, would the board like me to ask the subcommittee, the short-term rental committee to meet and start talking about, regulations that they could propose to the selectmen?
They've already drafted, they already have a set of draft regulations, correct?
Yep.
That they gave the Board of Selectmen, right?
I don't know if they like officially, did that in official capacity, but yeah, Dan has a copy of them.
All right.
I think that, they already provided that draft, and there's, of course, many examples that we can use, leverage from other towns. I'm not sure it's most efficient for that whole committee to take that on. I feel like, if Dan and Tony and the Board of Selectmen just take those potential regulations, we can whittle it down and customize it for Nahant pretty quickly. I don't think it's a huge job.
Yeah,
It's
I don't think it's a big deal.
my impression.
And those regulations apply to the short-term rentals generally. They don't specify which type of short-term rental. They regard pretty much registration. So they wouldn't apply exclusively to one particular type of short-term rental or general regulations.
Yeah, so that's separate from the law though, right? These are the
Exactly.
regulations, but the law would say no non-owner occupied short-term rentals are allowed.
And then the regs really wouldn't come into play. They wouldn't even come into play because it's not allowed. So there is no registration process for something that's not
Yeah,
allowed.
so like the regulations are things like, you have to have smoke detectors and you have to have off-street parking and things like that, not.
Things like that.
So are we not looking to continue the subcommittee?
They're already continued. They're still alive.
But we might not need their services. It might be more efficient to just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
That's
I
what I'm
agree.
thinking.
I agree, Josh. Why don't we, Tony, could you send a copy of the draft regulations that the short-term housing committee drafted to each of us for review?
Yeah, Dan, you had, when we met last week, you had started looking at them.
Yep.
From our last meeting, so.
I'll get you.
Did you forward that over?
Sure.
And I think that the other thing too is to potentially revisit, there was a lot of good elements of the citizens petition related to things that could be incorporated into the regulations as well. So, between those two things, we've got a pretty solid body of work to start from.
And Dan, could you also incorporate some of your ideas should the AG office approve the bylaw? Some suggested areas in the regulations that could address the change in the bylaw.
I don't think there'd be much again because these are regular.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be much either. Right?
Yeah,
I agree.
because they're generally applicable. They're not applicable just to one type. So
I agree.
yeah.
I
So
have one more question. Sorry, I know it's late. Will the towns people have any input in these regulations and so on and so forth, and how, to me, it's an open shut case. The state has said it's okay. The town said we don't want them. So that's it. Get them out of here. Obviously, it's not as black and white as that would be, but if there is a gray area and you are talking about rules and regulations and so on and so forth, which to me is a new point because they're not allowed. Is the townspeople going to be allowed to, you said you have a copy of all these things. Could I have a copy of that and see what's going on? Are they going to allowed to speak up and say, well, we don't want this, we don't want that. We voted that we do not want short-term rentals, non-owner occupied short-term rentals in residential areas. Again, to me, that's a black and white case. It's over and done with. You can't have them, period. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't
would
understand what
suggest-
all the, go ahead.
I would my recommendation to the board would be that, once we have a draft set of regulations that we would publish them and allow people to make comment, and maybe have a public meeting about it, to see what people have, comments on the draft regs, and then we would go back to the drawing board and decide whether to make changes or not.
Right, as long-
But
sorry,
we
go ahead.
could not, but George, if the AG came back and denied that element that you're concerned about, we wouldn't be able to do it through regulation. Just because the town approved it. We can't, you know what I mean? So let's
No, I
just.
don't.
let's
You get me
wait and
more,
see.
everything's getting me, go ahead. I'm just more confused now than ever. I thought it was basically a black and white issue. You can't have them, you can't have them. I mean, you've been told no, so I
Well, the
don't
Attorney
understand.
General has to approve that.
Well, I understand it, but I'm going under the guise that the Attorney General has approved it. And the town has approved it by an overwhelming vote that they don't want these rentals in residential areas. Why is there any kind of, wiggle room? You're not supposed
No,
to have them, period.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen wouldn't have the authority to change that rule, George. All we would do is regulations around that rule. In other words, we can't say, the people voted they don't want non-owner occupied Airbnbs, but we do. So we're going to change it. No, we don't have that authority. All we do is the rules like, parking, and you have to have it inspected by the fire department once a year. Regulations,
Yeah, but
quiet time after 10 o'clock, that kind of stuff.
yeah, I understand that, but if they're not allowed, why is there any rules and regulations? They're not allowed.
So the rules would be for the legal.
Well, I understand that,
short-term rentals.
in which we already have in place. The town voted on that from the short-term rental committee, all the rules and regulations about that, the parking, the noise violations, and so on and so forth. And they voted down the
It just
citizen
said,
petition.
George, that part of the article that was approved directed the Board of Selectmen to develop rules and regulations related to parking, related to, registration, related to fees, inspections. So it what that article did was it gave the selectmen a, call it like a boundary, a bubble to live within. And then the regulations will explain in detail how that stuff works. But yeah, it would only apply to legal short-term rentals. It wouldn't, right? So, should the AG approve the bylaw, the regulations will follow the article that passed at town meeting. Will live within that boundary.
Well, I appreciate Michelle Capano stepping up, because I didn't realize all that. Again, the only reason why I stepped up, because I don't believe the short-term rental people, committees, and also the selectmen didn't give the town the option that they weren't allowed to, we were told we weren't allowed to stop any short-term rentals. And as far as I'm concerned, the selectmen and the planning board all dropped the ball by saying we not letting the town know that we had a right to stop non-owner occupied short-term rentals in residential areas. That's why it was so hastily brought up, because we never, we weren't apprised of that. We were all told that we cannot stop this, which was wrong. Very, very wrong. All the public service in this town did a disservice to this town by not mentioning the fact that we were allowed to stop non-owner occupied short-term rentals in the Nahant.
So George, I don't think the town ever said that, because we never.
They never mentioned it,
received-
Tony. They never mentioned it. No one ever heard about that. That's why I stood up and said something. No one ever mentioned that we could stop the short-term rentals in non-owner occupied and
But
in residential areas.
The reason I'm correcting you on it, George, is because we don't know the answer to that. At the time, there was no language in the, if somebody had requested enforcement, or if the town enforced a bylaw, it would have gone, likely appealed to the ZBA. The ZBA would make a ruling. It would have gone to court. You don't know how the court ruling would have went because it wasn't clearly articulated in our bylaws at that time. That's why the town pushed for a committee to develop a bylaw.
I
so
understand
we
that, but
could
the committee
enforce-
never gave the town the information about, yes, you can stop non-owner occupied short-term rentals in residential areas. That was never brought up. The
It's-
town was under the
Judge.
guise that we couldn't stop it, period.
Josh, I'm sorry, but you're incorrect in that because I attended several of those committee hearings and that was a heated discussion about the committee members of whether or
No,
not
I
they
have to
wanted to
disagree with
do
you, Mark.
that or not.
I watched all those meetings too on Zoom, and
Well, you
that
might
was
wanna
never
watch-
brought up.
But
Oh,
George-
you
I
are
don't
mistaken.
want to argue. I'm not here to argue.
Yeah.
I'm not here
I'm
to
not
argue.
either, but
So-
you might want to revisit them, George.
But think about it, George. Think about it for a second. We still don't know if that is doable, right? We're still waiting.
Well, we're still waiting. I understand that, but like Michelle said, once the answer comes down, if it comes down in favor of what the townspeople voted, to me, it's a black and white issue.
Yeah.
They said, no, okay, you have 6 months to vacate anything you have online and stop the short-term rentals in in residential areas, period. End of story. I
Yes,
mean, that's what the town
accurate.
voted.
Yes,
We agree
that
with
is
you on
accurate.
that.
That
We
is
agree
accurate.
with you on George.
George,
we-
George, come on now, Mark.
We agree. We agree with you, George, on that.
All right, well,
George,
just I want to see how it plays out and want to make sure that the town is fully aware of what's going on. I'm not trying to say that you people did it on purpose. I think you might be taking me wrong here. I just don't think the town was informed enough to know that we were allowed to stop the non-owner occupied short-term rentals in a residential area. I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody, but it just, I don't think the town was, and the feedback I got after the town meeting was that we had no idea we could do this.
Yeah,
I'm
George,
not
I would
talking
say,
just-
I would
ahead,
say
I'm
if you're
sorry.
right, it's a fair criticism. I think it's a fair criticism.
Again, I'm not trying to criticize anybody. I'm just saying the town wasn't aware of this. And that's my point. And again, I understand you guys have a lot on board, but the planning board should have said something. Whatever. Again, I don't want to stop pointing fingers. That's not me. My interest is in the town. The people in this town, they've spoken, they don't want them. You're making money off of people's backs that they say, oh, we're doing it for the good of the town. We're helping this out. We're helping that out. You got to pay the mortgage. They don't mention this. Well, it might be my second or third mortgage I'm paying because I own 2 or 3 houses. This is not right for the people who live in this town that want some peace and quiet and want to know their neighbors and grow up knowing their neighbors and maybe their neighbors' kids. And now the kids' kids are around in my neighborhood now. That's what I want. I don't want somebody coming in here every other week from New York, Chicago, Florida, all over the place and just they don't give 2 hoots about the town. They don't give 2 hoots about their neighbors. And I don't think that's right because the people are making money off it. It's a money-making business. It's not for the good of the town. So it aggravates me when I hear these people using these lame, stupid excuses about how they're going to do this and do that and help people and so on and so forth. This is a small bedroom community, and that's what we want to keep it. So with that, I'll let you go because I'm starting to get heated out of the call here. Again, I apologize.
No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point, George. So
And
no problem.
that's one of the reasons why I don't go for selectmen because I'm so passionate about this town. I've been in this town for 61 years. I'm not a true Nahanter as per se. I wasn't born in Nahant. I wasn't born in my parents' house in Nahant, but I have been in here for 61 years. I do keep my eye on certain things. I speak up when I think it's necessary, but sometimes I don't because sometimes I just get so passionate. Everybody thinks I'm yelling and it's just not. And a lot of times the words won't come from my mind to my mouth. So I get frustrated and so on and so forth. So again, I just want to make sure the town's kept in the loop. And if it does pass by the Attorney General, this is what the town voted for by an overwhelming margin. So let's do what the people want and make this right. That's all.
Hey,
Again, I'll try to say goodnight again.
George, more people should generate the interest that you have
Well,
than they do.
Absolutely.
I wish
Absolutely.
more people, I guess I wish more people would. So that's why I guess I'm so passionate, because I hear from behind the scenes that these people tell me this stuff. And I'm like, well, you know what? I can't do much anymore because of my health and so on and so forth, but I can certainly speak up for some of the people around town and, and let them, you know, be their voice sometimes. And I apologize sometimes if my voice goes up and down. It's not because I'm mad. It's not because I'm upset with anybody. It's just that I'm so passionate. It's just my nature, and I wish I could be as calm as you guys. I really do. I think it'd be a little more effective, but I think I've made my point. And again,
Hey, George. Hey, George, I'm getting passionate about going to bed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Good night. Have sweet dreams.
Hey, Tony, last question. If the AG's office approves the article, do they also have to approve at a later date the rules and regulations?
No.
No.
Okay, good.
All right. Does anyone else on the call have any questions or comments? Nope, doesn't seem like it.
Motion to adjourn?
I move that the Board of Selectmen adjourn.
Second,
Motion is made, seconded, discussion, being hearing none, all in favor?
Josh Hitler, aye.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye.
Night.
Night.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Aye.